Believe it or not, spring football is right around the corner. Pitt starts spring camp in the South Side next week. So let's set the basketball conversation aside just for a little bit. We'll take a little break from bubble talk and good seasons, bad seasons, all those other debates we're having. And we'll pick those up again tomorrow and, again next week and beyond. But for now, let's talk a little spring football. What do we think about the Panthers heading into spring camp? Here on the Morning Pitt on the Thursday edition, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, spring camp comes up fast every year, it seems like, and certainly that's the case this year. Pitt will be jumping into it in the South Side next week. It's not even the end. Well, I mean, it is the end of February. It's the last day of February today, and March starts tomorrow, and first full week of March, Pitt will be jumping into spring camp. They start earlier in some years than others. I think a lot of it has to do with when they want to hold the spring game. They kind of pick a date there and then work backward. And I think if they work backward like 5 weeks from the spring game, they end up with, it would have been like the first week of camp would have been spring break. So, which is actually like 2 weeks from now. So they're going to have the first week of spring camp next week, and then they'll take a break for spring break and then wrap out, bang out the next 4 weeks of spring camp leading into the spring game on April 13th. Nothing official yet as far as that's concerned, but that's sort of what we pieced together and what we expect. What we think will happen. And there's a lot to talk about, of course. When you come off a 3-9 season, when you have the kind of coaching staff turnover, you have the transfers, you have all these different things that are surrounding, all the different storylines that are surrounding this team this year. It's there's always going to be a lot to talk about, and that's certainly the case here with Pitt entering spring camp. So let's get into some of the big storylines here on the Morning Pitt today on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know what we always ask you to do? Like and subscribe. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Panther-Lair, or youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's where we put all of our Pitt video content, our daily Morning Pitt videos that we do here every day of the week. Just a little bit of Pitt sports talk to get your day started Monday through Friday. It's where we have our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. We did it last night. Me and Jim Hammett get together and talk a little Pitt sports with you, comments and questions from you. It's always fun to have that interaction and that back and forth. We have our live post-game show that we do after every road basketball game. We did one on Tuesday night after the Clemson game. We'll do one on Saturday night after the Boston College game. And then we won't have any post-game shows after the two home games, the Florida State and NC State games, but once they get into the ACC tournament and whatever comes after that, we will have post-game shows for those as well, and they'll all be right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So subscribe and you won't miss any of it. And then, of course, the website, Panther-Lair.com. Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com, and message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends. All day, every day, Pitt fans are getting together at Panther-Lair.com and talking about Pitt sports. I think it's the best source of Pitt sports news you're going to find on the internet and the best online community of Pitt fans that you're going to find. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. All right, let's jump into spring camp. What are the big storylines? What are we really watching for? What are we going to be talking about a lot over the next 6 weeks as Pitt moves through spring practice? Well, first, let's offer our traditional disclaimer about spring camp. We're not going to learn anything about Pitt football from what happens over the next 6 weeks. Pause for dramatic effect. Taking a sip of coffee. Look. I think it's debatable how much the coaches learn about their team from spring football. You're watching your own guys hit your own guys. You're watching your guys try and learn the offense and try to learn the defense. Even though it's a defense that's been around for years, I mean, they're still installing things. They're still learning things. They still have new guys trying to acclimate, and they're going against each other. And I mean, I think you can learn some basic things. You'll have some ideas of who's good and who's bad. You'll have some ideas of what you should be able to do and what you won't be able to do. But for the most part, you're not going to find out a whole lot. You find out a little bit more in training camp, but you really don't find out about who your team is until, the season starts. And that's, you need to play real games. You need to go, head-to-head against another opponent before you really find out who you are and what you can do. And so we offer that caveat, and we're going to talk a lot. We're going to say a lot. The next 6 weeks, we're going to write a lot about spring football. We're going to talk about, who looks good or who's making this play or what we're hearing here or what we're hearing there. But all of it gets taken with a grain of salt, okay? So we all understand that, well, this guy was the stud in spring camp. I mean, yeah, but we'll see what they actually do when the time comes. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't things that, we need to keep an eye on. It doesn't mean there aren't storylines we're going to be monitoring. It doesn't mean there aren't notable, elements of this team that we'll be watching over the next 6 weeks, and certainly you'll be watching the spring game at Acrisure Stadium on April 13th. One of the first things that stands out to me when I look at this team is the sheer numbers, the volume of guys who are going to be on this team this year, because it's a lot. I think if I add it up right, Pitt will have 81 scholarship players in spring camp this year. 81. That's a ton. That's a ton of scholarship guys. Usually in spring camp, when you've lost all your seniors from the previous season and all your freshmen haven't arrived yet, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you'd be looking at somewhere in the 60s of scholarship guys in spring camp. And it was kind of nice. I think the coaches appreciated it. They had all their guys, all the returning guys who they were going to be counting on next year. And they could have sort of, smaller groups, smaller position groups. You get more individualized coaching. Guys get more reps. Guys get more coaching. Guys get more attention. Guys get more tape. And it was all better. I think coaches liked having smaller groups. Actually, this is a question I'll ask Pat Narduzzi this week. Or next week when we get a chance to talk to him is, do you kind of wish you had sort of a smaller group? And I'm sure he'll say, no, it's better to have bodies. It's better to have lots of guys who are, available and you can get more work for lots of guys and all this different stuff. But the reality is 81 scholarship guys is damn near a full roster. That's pretty much a full scholarship roster. And the reason they're going to have so many scholarship players this spring is because they have 9 freshmen who enrolled in January and they have 12 transfers. Add in 7 super seniors. In addition to the transfers, there's 1 super senior who transferred, Key Thompson, the linebacker. But then you have 7 super seniors who came back. Daniel Carter, Jason Collier, and Ryan Jacoby, and Bam Brema, Dayon Hayes, Nate Temple, and Brandon George. 7 guys playing that extra year of eligibility due to the COVID season. And those are guys that you wouldn't typically have. So between the 9 freshmen, the 12 transfers, and the 7 super seniors, you've got 28 guys that you wouldn't typically have. So like I said, you have 81 scholarship players. That's what I'm projecting them right now, to have 81 scholarship players this spring. You got 28 of them wouldn't typically be here. Even if you want to say, well, maybe you bring in 1 transfer, or maybe you have 3 freshmen who enroll early. That's still 24, 25 guys. You're looking at somewhere in the 50s in terms of your total number of scholarship players as opposed to 81. I think on the whole, it's probably a good thing. I think if there are guys you're going to be counting on, certainly transfers you're going to be counting on to play this coming season, it's good to have them on campus so they, in practicing, so they can, have that much of a head start learning the offense, learning the defense, getting in the strength and conditioning room. That's obviously huge for the freshmen to get into the weight room and start working with the strength staff. But it's a big group. It's a big group. And of course, the other big group and one of the other big storylines to watch this spring is the new coaches. We've talked about this a bunch, the complete overhaul of the offensive coaching staff, how those, just a whole new group coming in. 100% turnover in addition to the defensive line coach with Charlie Partridge leaving. Pat Narduzzi has never shied away from having turnover and changes on his coaching staff. He had consistency last year. They had the status quo. Everybody stayed. Nobody got fired. But he's had change more years than not. But none of them really approached what they're doing this year. None of them approached the change and the turnover that they've had this year. And so it'll be interesting to see. Does practice look different? If you're just changing 1 or 2 coaches, you're probably not going to have any major overhauls to the way practice is run. But when you're changing the entire offensive side of the ball, chances are there's going to be a new system put in place. I mean, there's obviously a new offensive system put in place, but it'd be interesting to see if the order of practice changes at all, the way they sort of go about things. My guess is Pat Narduzzi will generally keep the same structure to practice, but I'm going to assume Cade Bell has some ideas. That he's coming in here with certain ideas about how, not just to run the offense, but to how to teach the offense, how to practice the offense, how to install the offense. And it'll be interesting to see if that looks a little bit different, since there's really no anchor, no tether to the old way of doing things. You know, every coach on the offensive side of the ball is new. And so you would have to think they're going to do things a little bit differently. And it's certainly going to be interesting to watch. Now, of course, within that offense, there's going to be the big question at quarterback. And we're not going to see a lot of it. The reality is we're not going to see every day how they're lining up ones and twos and threes and who's on the top of the depth chart and who's making a move, who's making the best plays, who's making the best throws. We'll ask Pat Narduzzi after every practice about who did what, and he'll say, I don't even remember. I don't even know. I think, and he'll name like a walk-on, made a really nice throw during our Skelly period or something like that. And the coaches can come out after a game and you can ask about a specific play. And I know Pat Narduzzi always says about I'll have to watch the tape, but these coaches have recall of everything, and they could come out and tell you, hey, we had the right play set up, but a guy moved his left hand before his right, and that cost us on that play. He ended up missing the block. I mean, the coaches have perfect recall, and then he comes out at the end of practice and says, somebody made a nice throw. I forget who it was. I don't know. He knows. He just doesn't want to tell us. Every time you hear the coaches say, I don't remember who did that in practice, they know exactly who did that in practice, and they're just saying they don't want to tell you. Or me, in particular, because I'm the one that they'll be facing when they say, I don't want to tell you. Or they say, I don't remember. But the quarterback situation is going to be one to watch. I think the way they're going to open spring camp is with Nate Yarnell as number one. Pat Narduzzi and Cade Bell have said as much. I think Christian Bayer is going to be right behind him, and then we'll see who ends up as number three. You know, is it going to be Ty Diefenbach, the only other returning quarterback from last year's roster? Is it going to be Julian Duggar, the freshman who enrolled early from Penn Hills? Is it going to be Eli Holstein, who transferred in from Alabama? I'm not really sure. It'll be interesting. You know, I think, in terms of seniority, like guys who are just the oldest, after Yarnell and Veyer, I mean, Holstein and Diefenbach have the same amount of college experience. And it's only 1 year more than Julian Duggar has. So it's not like you've got some clear option, I think, to step in as that number three quarterback. But the coaches are going to have to pick somebody. And I think you'll see a rotation. My guess of what you'll see this spring or what the coaches will do this spring is Yarnell works a lot with the ones. Veer works a lot with the twos. And then there's a rotation among Holstein, Diefenbach, and Duggar for the work with the threes. That would be my guess. I have no idea if that's what they're going to do. And then once guys, if somebody starts making a move either up or down, then they'll adjust accordingly. If Diefenbach starts lighting it up and playing really well, maybe he moves up to the two. If Veer is just perfect in this offense, if this offense is just a perfect fit for him, he doesn't turn the ball over and all that stuff, then maybe he moves up to the number one. If Duggar comes in and is just incredible, and maybe he moves, they'll sort it out as they go, and they'll move guys up and down throughout spring camp. But I think they've said Yarnell is going to open camp as number one. My guess is he'll close camp as number one as well. But we'll see, how it goes. That's sort of my guess. If I had to put money on it right now, who's going to be the coach's number one quarterback coming out of spring camp? My guess is that it'll be Nate Yarnell. Will the coaches tell us that? I don't know. I doubt it. And how confident am I in Nate Yarnell holding on to that number one spot all through camp? I mean, I think better than 50%, but how much better? I don't know. Remains to be seen. What we definitely saw last year is the impact that poor quarterback play can have. And I think Pat Narduzzi probably, as much as he might have had his eyes open by the good quarterback play in 2021, he had to have had his eyes open even more about bad quarterback play last season. He knows that he's going to need a great performance from the quarterbacks this year, and I think he'll be watching for that to see how they work in Cade Bell's offense. And so much of it is going to be, how do they run the offense? Are they able to run the offense? Can they get the play called? Can they break the huddle? And can they operate the offense. And that's something the coaches are going to be able to find out a lot about this spring. We might not get a real sense of it, but the coaches will be able to find out a lot about it this spring as they go through these 15 practices or 14 practices heading into the spring game. Other positions I'm interested in how the O-line depth and rotation sort of shakes out, but I'm really curious about the defensive line. I was thinking about this yesterday, and I'll probably on Monday or maybe even over the weekend, I'll write a projected 2-deep for spring camp, what I think the 2-deep will look like. But I'm really not sure what to expect. I mean, I think Deion Hayes is a starter. That's one. Beyond that, I don't know. You've got two other super seniors in Bam Brima and Nate Temple. Neither one of them has really done much of anything in his careers. And then they brought in the transfers, Nate Matlack, another a veteran guy, a senior from Kansas State, and then David Ojebwe, a young defensive end, but a high pedigree guy from transferring in from Clemson. My guess is the first time they line up for the first team snap on Monday during Monday's practice, it'll be Deion Hayes and Nate Temple as the starters, with Bam Brima and Nate Matlack behind them. Just for like the very first practice, they're the most veteran guys. They've played the most. They've been around the most. Those will be the guys. And then it all like shakes out and gets rotated around after that. That's my guess. I could be completely wrong about that, but it sort of makes the most sense. Defensive tackle is tougher to guess, though. I mean, I don't know. I don't know who starts in there. I don't know who you put in as your ones. Sean Fitzsimmons, Elliott Donald, Nakai Johnson. Moving inside from defensive end to defensive tackle, that was a move that Charlie Partridge was making. I mean, I assume Tim Doust will keep that move made because Johnson really hadn't done anything at defensive end. Nick James, the transfer from Indiana. Isaiah Neal, the redshirt freshman who, I think everybody was really excited about, and he never really played last year. Does he step into a first-team role in spring camp? Francis Brew. Why not? I mean, like, all those guys, I mean, you can't say any of those guys has really done anything in his career. James has probably played the most out of all of them. But Fitzsimmons, I guess, would probably be a 1 on the first rep of practice, first team drill practice. I would guess Fitzsimmons. And then I don't know who would be next to him. Maybe Neal. Maybe Nick James. Maybe Nakai Johnson. I really don't. I have no, like I said, I'm going to write a projected depth chart, and I have no idea what to do with the defensive tackles. It's probably the position where I have the least of even a plausible guess of what to do with those guys, because I just don't know what how the coaches are going to approach it. I think it's going to be a true competition, a battle, and they'll see which 4 can emerge to take those top 2 spots, the 2 deep spots. I just don't know who those candidates are going to be. I think Sean Fitzsimmons has a chance to be a really good player. I think Isaiah Neal can be really good. I think Nick James has the pedigree for sure. I think Nick, we had heard that Charlie Partridge was moving Nakai Johnson inside to tackle, and I had heard that it was going really well. That it seemed like he had found a home and a spot where he would fit better than when he was trying to play defensive end. But I mean, we've heard those kinds of things about guys like that before, guys who hadn't really contributed much, and now they found a new home, and this is where they always should have been, and it a lot of times doesn't seem to work out. So I don't know. It's I don't know. I could probably make better guesses about the rotation at cornerback, where they have obviously got a lot of open jobs. On the offensive line, where I think there's some open jobs. Running back's pretty obvious. I think quarterback is probably going to be the way I laid it out there. Wide receiver, I think who's going to be on the 1s and the 2s. Safety, obviously, we know about that position. But D-line, I really don't know what to expect there. And that kind of leads me into the last storyline, or at least, as far as the ones we're going to talk about today, and that's the impact of the freshmen and the transfers in spring camp. Like I said, there's 21 guys, 9 freshmen who enrolled early and 12 transfers who came in January. And it's going to be interesting to see how those guys fit in. Like, you take transfers, and I think Pitt took some young transfers with the hope of developing them and holding on to them for a while. I mean, a guy like Eli Holstein, I think is a good example. David Ojebwe is probably another example. He's a young guy who, we'll see how he fits in. But there are veteran players who I would assume Pitt brought in to fill immediate needs, like Nate Matlack or Jake Overman, the tight end, I would assume. Lyndon Cooper, the offensive lineman from NC State, I would assume was brought in to fill an immediate need. Key Thompson, the linebacker, an immediate need. Tamon Lynham, the cornerback from Nebraska, I think was brought in to fill an immediate need. Not to mention, Nile Upa, the long snapper, I think obviously was brought in to fill an immediate need. He's probably locked into being a starter. And if not, that's a waste of a scholarship, because you bring in a transfer long snapper, you better have found the right one so he can play a prominent role for you. But I'm so a few of those guys, whatever I just listed there, 4 or 5 of those transfers I think are probably pretty well locked into starting jobs or were brought in to take over a starting job. But there's a lot of guys who are going to be in battles and competitions. Eli Holstein, Desmond Reed, CJ Lee, David Ojebwe, Raphael Williams, the skill guys to a large extent. I think we're brought in to compete. And so how are they going to fit in? And then the same for the freshmen. There's 9 freshmen who enrolled early. The quarterback, Julian Duggar, running back, Juels Goff, wide receiver, Cameron Montero, the offensive lineman, Maurice Schmorenzer, defensive ends, Zach Crothers and Sincere Edwards, defensive tackle, Francis Brew, linebacker, Jeremiah Marcelin, and cornerback, Nigel Maynard. How are those guys going to be in the mix? They're enrolling early. They're going to get a lot of extra practice time. They're going to get an opportunity to learn the offense and learn the defense. And, true freshmen enroll in January. They're giving themselves a shot to be in the competition for the 2 deep. What kind of work are they going to get this spring? It's going to be interesting to see. I think when we get to the spring game and we see if some of these freshmen or transfers are making an impact, it'll be interesting. I'm not, I think there's a handful of transfers there that I would say are probably going to be starters, and then a bunch of guys, transfers and true freshmen, who are going to be battling for jobs. So there's a lot of storylines, and we'll certainly be writing a lot about them over the next 6 weeks here on Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com. Go there for all your Pitt sports coverage. And then, of course, right here at YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com, we'll be talking about it in these morning Pitt videos every day of the week, our weekly live show at 8 o'clock, and any other things. And all our interviews and practice highlights and press conferences, all those things from spring camp. It'll all be right here at YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So like this video and subscribe, YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you won't miss any of our Pitt video content. Thanks so much for tuning in today. It's been a great week so far. Looking forward to tomorrow, where we have the Morning Pitt mailbag. A lot of great questions already rolling in. Get those in. If you want to ask a question, go to the premium message board between Fifth and Forbes at Panther-Lair.com, and then you can submit your question, and we'll answer as many as we can in the mailbag tomorrow. So thanks for tuning in today. Hope you've had a great week thus far. Enjoy your Thursday, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt mailbag right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com.